Welcome to Inside Politics with Kevin Klein, beyond the headlines, beyond the spin. Straight facts, sharp analysis, and common sense conversation you won't hear anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Kevin Klein. Welcome to a special election night-ish edition of Inside Politics. I'm joined by my Winnipeg Sun columnist colleague, Royce Koop, who is also a professor of political sciences at the University of Manitoba, and a former colleague, Winnipeg City Councillor, Brian Mays. Brian, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I've never got to do this on election night. I've always wanted to. So
have you? It's kind of and me as well. I mean, you and I have had different experiences on election nights by sitting there waiting and counting votes, which is I have to say right off the top, for anybody that put their name on the ballot, whether you're winning or you're losing, I hear you. It's a tough night. If you win, there's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of energy. You feel great. If you lose, you feel terrible. But you stuck it out. You put your name on the ballot, and good for you for doing that. And thank you very much for doing that as well. So, gentlemen, we certainly have a result that, as we're speaking right now, we don't know if it's going to be a Liberal majority or a Liberal minority. But Royce, is this what you were expecting?
Yeah, I mean, my money was on a Liberal majority. The electoral system is designed to produce majority governments, and I thought that the Liberals were far ahead enough in Ontario that they could kind of distribute their vote across that province and win an awful lot of seats with pretty small margins of victory. And so they could turn a relatively small lead in the popular vote into a lot of seats. That's kind of happening. The Liberals are doing not as well as we thought in Atlantic Canada, which is interesting. But they are doing well in Quebec. They're doing well in Ontario. They're doing well pretty much everywhere. We're not so sure about BC right now. That might be a crack in the Liberals' armor, but it'll be very close.
The one, I guess, well, two shocks, not a big shock for me, was the NDP pretty much being obliterated at this particular point in time. The block is down quite a bit. Now, Brian, for true disclosure or whatever, you did some door knocking for Leah Gazan and
Yep.
have supported the NDP party. But I mean, I've been a conservative, and you and I got along better than anybody else at City Council in Winnipeg. So at
Sure.
least we're like-minded in the fact that no matter what party we belong to, we have to do what's best for the people. Are you surprised by tonight's results?
And, I mean, it looks really bleak. I mean, it's based on the polling. No, it looked like the NDP was in for a very hard night, and we can hopefully come back to some of what caused that later on. So no, I would be surprised if Gazan doesn't pull it out. I mean, I don't agree with her on everything, but I thought she's been a pretty good local rep. So 5 or 6 seats nationally was the last I saw. That's pretty shockingly low. That's lower than 93, and there was a long rebuild after 93. So yeah, this is very grim for the NDP.
What do you think? Well, we have a few minutes. So what do you think led to this?
I liked Royce's column the other day, which was a couple of things, which was, I mean, the NDP certainly had the chance to bring down the government under Trudeau, probably giving them a good shot at being official opposition and in a conservative majority. They chose not to do that, and this is what they're getting from it. And I think a very odd campaign, sort of attacking Poilievre, and the only thing they could have done, they're down from like 20% to 8% of the polls. It's all gone Liberals. And they were all over the map, these door, ads with, conservative and Liberal going around in a revolving door, and then saying, well, we never support Pierre Poilievre. So it's like you're defeating your own ads. Like, if you're saying the other two are interchangeable, do it, but don't say, well, they're not really interchangeable. One's much worse than the other. In fact, so bad that you should, like, it just seemed almost self-destructive at times, the NDP campaign, and this is the result you see.
Yeah, there was a kind of incoherence to it, and yeah, I've kind of been pretty hard on Jagmeet Singh, I think deservedly so, but it's also the NDP was in a very tough position right from the start with Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the wild card in this election campaign. It seemed right from the start, as soon as Mark Carney became leader of the Liberal Party, he assumed the mantle of the protector of Canada, the elbows up guy. Even before that wasn't even the Liberal slogan. People were saying elbows up, and then he adopted it somehow. It just became the Liberal Party slogan. And so what was the space for the NDP? How does the NDP deal with that? Uh, I don't think he did a good job in this campaign, but I also recognize that it was a very tough situation for him to be in.
So the elbows up, didn't that come from Mike Myers in a quick TV commercial that he did with Mark Carney? I believe that's where that came from. So I guess Austin Powers came up with elbows up, and all of a sudden we adopted that as the Canadian salute.
I thought people were saying it before that, and then all of a sudden it was just Carney, the Liberal Party slogan. Like they just commandeered it. I could be wrong about that.
Well,
And
I can tell.
it did dominate the first chunk of the campaign. I think the NDP ran a terrible campaign. I don't think the Conservatives ran a terrible campaign, but they could never quite seem to. Once the carbon tax was gone as an issue, they really seemed to flounder. I mean, they're going to get much more popular vote than they did the last two elections, but yeah, to what end? As Royce is saying, the system is designed to reward the party that gets the highest, that distributes its votes the most effectively.
So, I mean, as a hockey official, first of all, I'll say don't get your elbows up because that's, probably going to lead to a head contact penalty for sure in the corner. But I believe that, as I sit back and I watch this, it's something that I had thought all along in this campaign and even before the campaign that the conservative government had put every egg they had, even before the election was called, into taking down Justin Trudeau and into beating up the carbon tax. So you basically played out, you gave the team your playbook and you had two plays. That was it. You had two plays and you gave the other team your playbook. And then all of a sudden the other team went, okay, well, we'll get rid of Trudeau. So we'll take that away. And then we'll get rid of the carbon tax kind of, and take that away. I mean, yeah, Trump is a big part of that, but I mean, they did take away two of the biggest fighting points for the Conservatives, didn't they, Royce?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in fairness, you would maybe not have expected the Liberal Party to have been so utterly cynical and lacking in shame that they would just get rid of kind of the central climate policy that they've been fighting for and advocating for almost a decade now. That would be, assume that you don't really know much about the Liberal Party in Canadian history. But yeah, I mean, the Conservatives, the knock against Poilievre is that he never pivoted in response to Trump. I don't think that's totally fair. I think before the campaign started, he gave an outstanding speech, his Canada First speech. He did speak to this issue, but it seemed very quickly that this became a baked-in advantage that Carney had. Canadians saw him as the person that was best able to take on Trump for whatever reason, his qualifications, his experience, and it was very difficult to chip away at that. I actually think the Conservatives ran an outstanding campaign. They were disciplined, they were focused, they stayed on their message. In a normal election, it would have probably produced a great outcome for them, but this was not a normal election. This is an election that no one saw coming with a central issue that no one really anticipated.
So in
Yeah.
politics, it's always hard to determine who's going to win, though. But Brian, did you have an idea that this is how this may have played out, or were you thinking something entirely different?
Well, no one could have foreseen this 4 months ago. I mean, you had that projection after Friedland resigned from cabinet. There was a projection that had the Liberals winning one seat nationally, somewhere in Montreal, and then to this tonight, maybe a majority or just a razor thin loss. Like it's no, an incredible turnaround, and the bloc, did not implode. They're going to lose seats, but their share of the vote's going to go 1%, maybe it's lower than last time, but it's really the NDP that's really taken a beating here, and the Conservatives were up over 40 in those polls in December, and are probably going to be a little under 40. So no, it would have been very hard to foresee this in any conventional analysis. I mean, it wasn't a one-person leadership race either. It wasn't sort of coronation. It was fairly, for a while there, it didn't look like Carney would pull it off. But once he did, it was just a sort of effortless rise in the polls, quite astonishing, really. And yeah, people wanted to stop Trump and people wanted to stop Polyev, and this is how they landed.
So, Royce, tell me, because you've talked about this before, Donald Trump and his little tweet that he put out today during the election. I mean, again, I think you've called it right. That's a little bit of election interference, if you will. It's his ego playing into that. But how do you feel about that? I mean, obviously, you're not going to be happy with that, but do you feel that that had any impact early today in the voting? Do you think that got, because right now, what I'm looking at, some of the data I'm looking at it, and it's about 9:45 Central Time right now, the actual number of people who voted isn't as high as people had estimated.
Yeah. Yeah, people were they seemed to have voted in the advance polls in higher numbers, and so that led people to think we were going to get record high turnout. That hasn't really turned out to be the case. We know that if you're concerned about Trump, if you're concerned about the 51st state, that is something that pushed you towards the Liberal Party. And so, parties do something, they do priming. If they're strong on an issue, they talk about it, they want it to be in the news. And Carney was certainly doing that with a lot of, outlandish, apocalyptic language. Trump is good, the soldiers are going to march across the border. And so Carney was doing that, which is what you would expect. But Trump was also doing it. Every few days we would get a tweet or something on his social media site that basically functioned to remind Canadians about this threat. And in doing so, it primed an issue that helped Carney. We got a little break in the middle of the campaign, and all of a sudden, people were talking more about cost of living, about inflation, about home prices. And sure enough, the conservatives started to kind of inch up in the polls over that little period. But as soon as Trump came back, reminding Canadians about this, priming that issue was always going to be something that would help Carney. I have very little doubt that those tweets that he sent out or whatever helped the Liberals.
Haven't seen the tweet. I do not want to let the evening go without a the maybe the Greens and the NDP need finally to talk merger, because I mean you saw between 93 and what was it, 2004, you had two conservative parties and they didn't like losing, so they got together finally, and Harper led them to a great success there. The Greens to be so inept that you pull a number of candidates off the ballot enough that you then fall out of the debate is pretty damning. So, I think another thing that helped the Liberal Party was the other alternatives on the progressive side looked just like they were in a shambles. Like, why would you vote for these folks when they're warning you about Pierre Poilievre? They were almost forcing people to vote Liberal or encouraging that. So perhaps after some sober second thought, the party should think about merger. I don't know if that'll ever happen, but yeah, the Greens campaign was well, not as they're down a few percent in the polls. I think the NDP will be down about 10%. It looks like, which is pretty damning.
Now, I want to talk about the next few years, because we won't be able to, and we'll sign off before we find out whether or not it's going to be a minority government. It's looking more and more like a minority government. We're looking at the numbers right now. But what do you think what are the first moves? Because you talked about Trump, and I want to talk about that for a couple of seconds. There is a connection between, Carney and Trump when you look at the money management and you look at some things that involved Elon Musk and stuff. We know that Trump wanted a liberal leader. Do we see action happening right away for that? I mean, we know that Carney has to reach out to the West. There's going to be some serious issues there. We saw that there was already a petition started in Alberta last week to hold a referendum to separate from Canada. They needed 600,000 signatures. Rumors, and only rumors, saying that they were close to that. What happens now in the first 100 days?
I don't know. Carney is shockingly still kind of an unknown person. He came into this race with a reputation as someone that would be more moderate than Justin Trudeau, that would be more focused on economic issues. But over the course of the campaign, the more we saw of him, the more we thought, "Hey, actually, this guy is more like Trudeau than we realized." There is a real focus on climate issues, on social issues. And so I'm not sure what to expect from him. And given some of what he's written in the past, I'm not sure that we're going to see a great deal of progress on resource development, on pipelines. I can actually see things basically continue on with the status quo as they are right now. But the big answer is I don't know. We've been given a very short period of time to get to know this guy in this country, and we still don't know him very well. But yeah, I guess the Conservatives are a different issue. It's going to be Mark Carney steering what looks like a minority government. Like that's getting clearer and clearer,
Yeah,
actually.
so that'll be held up by the block.
It'll be almost exactly what we had in the last parliament. Isn't that great when you have an election, then you get the almost the exact same thing. We're going to get the same dynamics. The NDP, even with fewer MPs, will have the ability to influence the government, to support the government.
But I mean, it would have to be. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me. It would have to be pretty they'll have to be at like 164, 165 to be able to do it with the NDP. So it might be the bloc holding the balance of power. But yeah, I don't. I mean, what'll happen in the first 100 days? I think Royce is right. I don't know. I mean, I do think Carney has been projecting a much more sort of economic focus, and the grown-ups are in the room, so we'll see smaller cabinet, which I thought was very smart of him. He should keep do good I think, in cabinet. I mostly get along with Terry, so I think Terry is born to be the environment minister, so that would be positive. Yeah, and I mean the NDP leadership, I presume, will change, and I actually thought the bloc had pretty good leadership, so I would think they'll stay with that.
So, okay, well, let's talk about now the whole concept of being a minority government and how that plays out. How does Quebec, which has said no to the pipeline, and I mean they're very clear. The Bloc is very clear on the fact that they're only there. Like he wasn't there to become prime minister. They are only running in the election to make sure Quebec's interests are number one. So, how is that going to play out, and how long can a government being propped up by a separatist party, if you will, remain as a minority government? I don't see this lasting 4 years.
Well, Brian made a good point before. I was talking about the NDP, and Brian said it's actually the Bloc that's going to have power. Actually, that's correct. So right now, the Liberals.
Hang on a second, Royce. 3 weeks ago, I predicted that. You guys all thought I was crazy.
No, I didn't.
No,
I
no,
give
you
credit
all
where it's
thought I
due.
was crazy.
It's so right now, Liberals are leading elected in 159, and the Conservatives and the Bloc together are 158, one seat away. And so if they can switch that, we're talking two seats, then the Tories and the Bloc can defeat the Liberals and force an election anytime they want to, anytime that they can put their differences aside. That's a recipe for a short minority government because there's always the chance that Carney he's gonna tank pretty quickly once he actually has to start to confront some of the problems facing this country. And people realize, this guy isn't that different from Justin Trudeau. If that's the case, and there's an opportunity for the Bloc and the Tories to defeat that government, it could happen pretty quickly.
Well, the second he brings back a different carbon tax, it might not be the
Yeah.
consumer-facing carbon tax, but there was talk of him bringing a carbon tax on a tariff, if you will, but a tariff carbon tax on products that come into Canada. So when we get products into Canada, they start going up in price. So the cost of living is going to get more and more. When he starts doing that, I suspect the Bloc is going to have to push back a little bit, and it could end a minority government pretty quickly. I don't know what the record is for ending a minority government, but my memory is failing me on that one. I thought it was only a few months once for a minority government.
79, 80. It was election in May and election again in January or early, no, in February. It's my niece is born on that election day, so I would get a nasty email from my niece if I got that wrong. So yes, May election for Joe Clark, who was close. He was pretty damn close to getting a majority, and he tried to govern that way, and it came back to haunt him. Obviously, though, interesting career thereafter, but. Yeah, so no, Royce is right. This is not the recipe for stability if you've got, in essence, a regional party holding the balance of power. But yeah, again, the NDP may have enough. Not at 159 and 5 or 6 for the NDP. That's still not enough. So even with a green or two in there, so yeah, this could be very tight.
Royce, from your perspective, because I mean, we're going to wrap up here pretty quick because there's still results that are coming in and we're waiting for Vancouver. I guess it could switch in Vancouver. If you look at the polls, the Conservatives could win more seats in Vancouver, which would really make that minority government much more weak, as you kind of alluded to. If let's talk about Vancouver or the at least BC, if Singh doesn't win his seat, and it does push to the Conservatives, what happens in the next election? What
Uh,
happens when that interim or the minority government, let's say it lasts a year, if it lasts that long, if it lasts that long, because I don't know if it will, but let's say it lasts a year.
Yeah, you make a good point. There's about 10 seats in the Lower Mainland in BC that don't have any results back yet, and I some of these seats are going to go to the Tories, but I think most of them will go to the Liberals. So they might be able to open this up a little bit. I don't think there's enough space left for them to get a majority government, but they might have a safer minority that's not just vulnerable to the Tories and the Bloc. I mean, if we go into an election fairly quickly, it's going to be because the Tories are ready and whoever partners with them, the Bloc, are ready for an election. And it might be that whoever the new leader of the NDP is, who the leader of the Bloc is, they learn from the experience of Jagmeet Singh that you have to strike when the iron's hot. Like you can't just, Justin Trudeau, there's like 2 years where it was a disaster. He could have taken him down. The NDP could be the official opposition. They could be competing for government in this election. And he just kind of let the opportunity pass him by. And so it might be the case that in this new parliament, the opposition leaders are a little bit more daring, a little bit more willing to take a risk if the Liberal government is vulnerable. And it could happen very quickly.
Yes,
Any more?
my said to my son last night. Like, there's actually a great quote from Lenin about striking when the iron is hot. Not that I want to be remembered as quoting Vladimir Lenin a whole hell of a lot, but it's Royce is right in this. Like, and perhaps too, we should look at amending whatever the pension qualification laws are, because that's a bit of an underlying story here. Was the NDP not pulling because they wanted to get their 6 years in? Well, that's human nature. And Kevin, you've been there, and I've been. You want something to show for your years, but my God, if that was what you know, we shouldn't be having elections hinge on whether somebody's a few days short of pension qualifications. That seems a bit unfortunate. Simplify that somehow.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe they have to start. I'm going to be honest about this one, Brian. From my time in politics, both at this municipal level and then a little bit of time there at the province, I don't know why they're not looking at more of the RRSP matching and such programs. Having a pension and a retirement plan, you're just asking for trouble, right? You're asking for people that are hanging on. You're asking for all the negativity. Most organizations now don't have pension plans. They have the RSP, they have the matching. I'm okay with that. Like I'm okay with that. If you're in politics and you're going to have a matching RSP, I'm fine with that. Now we're a little bit off topic, but that I'm hoping what happens now after this election. I think they're going to have a minority government, but I'm really hoping that we're going to take a look at government. This is a really good opportunity for Pierre to stick around and start arguing a different argument, right? Like more policy, put together, show he's ready to be the leader, put out more and more policy. The phrases, his approach, I think all had merit. And I think that he really sincerely wanted to be a part of change in Canada. But this just might be an opportunity for him to polish those messages up and polishes those policies up. Maybe not. Maybe he decides he doesn't want to run again. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big story over the next few days is what happens to Poilievre because it's the Conservative Party, as Jeff Courier likes to say, with the Tories. It's, one election. If you don't win, you're out. That would be a real mistake. I mean, Poilievre, he's got over 40% of the vote. These are like Harper levels of popularity. The fact that he didn't win has less to do with him, more to do with the collapse of smaller parties. Uh, I just, especially in a minority situation in which the government could fall, I think it would be madness for the Tories to force him out. Like give the guy an extra shot. Take a lesson from the NDP, which actually gives their leaders maybe too many chances. But take a lesson from them. Like give your leaders a second chance.
Yeah, well,
You know,
that's true.
to end on it, we've gone into a lot, but you got to say, I mean, it's a remarkable feat by Carney, a man who had never run for office. I mean, a few months ago, I would have said, well, no one wants this guy to have his entry level political job be prime minister. On the other hand, Trump's entry level, et cetera, et cetera. Carney, amidst all these, his lack of French is going to kill him, his inexperience is going to kill him. He's played this brilliantly, and he'll be the prime minister.
Some changes could happen by tomorrow morning. We could see some adjustments in this, but I think the one thing that we can say with all confidence is that we're going to have a liberal minority government again.
Yeah.
Nothing changes in Canada. Nothing changes.
Oh, things change. Got to believe in change.
Brian, you're ever always the optimist. I
Nah,
love that about you. And again, as I said, we had certainly had a lot of political differences, but we were able to get a lot done.
yes,
But I really I got to sit back and I just think nothing changes. I'm
it,
going to
it
be
is.
watching Alberta closely.
It is an astounding result. I have to say, based on where we were 6 months ago, it's a completely unastounding result from where we were 6 weeks ago. But it's a funny business.
What do you
Royce, anything more astounding than Rachel Notley's win in Alberta? Maybe I can't think of anything quite as out of Bob Ray in Ontario. I was on that campaign. That might
Yeah.
rise. But that was coming from a that was that was not this dynamic. Disastrously low incumbent and then shooting up. Christy Clark held when she trailed in every poll to Adrian Dix. I remember that. But I can't think of anything like this.
Yeah, I mean the other side of this is that that Carney was a lot further ahead than he ended. At the start of the campaign, he was over 50%. He dropped quite a bit. He's at 45% right now. So on that view, his campaign didn't really go that well. He didn't sustain his lead. The truth is that, when Polyev was like at 60% approval, that wasn't a real, that was just people expressing their anger, parking their vote with the non-liberal. But yeah, I was kind of when I watch these election results now, I always feel like I'm living history. Like people 100 years ago, what are people going to say about this election? It kind of makes everything a little bit more exciting.
What are they
Yep.
going to say?
I don't know. I'm still figuring this out. It's I guess it's kind of a continuity election.
Well,
There
I
might have
appreciate.
been two elections in the same year in '74 in Britain for a very short-lived minority. I think there. That's why I'm not the prof and Royce says. I'll have to look that up.
No, I mean that might be interesting to read if that's what's going to happen right now.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me and have a good night. Royce, we'll talk later this week about the fallout.
Yeah. Thanks so
All
much.
right.
Take
Thank
care,
you, Kevin.
guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Royce.
Thanks for watching Inside Politics with Kevin Klein. Please like and subscribe to this channel and visit thewinnipegssun.com for more.